we study collaboration, but we also practice it. And the work we're going to talk about today, it has involved all these people, some of whom you may know. Julie has been an intern here a couple of times, and Amy is now a faculty member at UIUC, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to do the first little chunk of this, and then Judy will take over and do the second chunk of it. As Dan mentioned, we've been sort of in this space of studying collaboration for a long time. I think the very first project we're involved in was in the mid-'80s. So it's now getting close to 30 years. We actually built in the late 80s a program called Shredded. It was a shared editor, which is actually functionally very close to what Google Docs is today. So we did a whole series of studies, both of face-to-face meetings and distributed meetings using Shredded. So we kind of were into this space a long time ago, and it's kind of fun now for us to see that everybody in the world can get access to these kinds of capabilities, which we had developed as a research tool many years ago. We published this paper, Distance Matters, in the year 2000. In 2008, we published a book, MIT Press, on scientific collaboration on the internet. And we just now, within the last few weeks, published a book with Morgan and Claypool called Working Together Apart. And the kind of central theme in a lot of this work is trying to understand the mix of technology and social practices that go together to make collaboration work. And that's kind of the main theme of our work. We've explored over the years many different technologies, many different kinds of situations, small groups, large groups, and so on. And I think we've actually made some progress. And in fact, this 2014 book is kind of the latest turn of the crank on what we think we've learned over this long period of time. We have 6 topics to talk about today. We'll talk about some of them quite briefly. We've been doing a study of the rollout of Google Apps on university campuses. I'll talk a little bit about that. We've done some work on how people deal with cloud. Not so well, it turns out. Julia Haynes is doing some work on studying collaboration in seed accelerators, and then we have a whole series of kind of more micro projects. We'll probably spend more time on these than on these early ones. So we've had an opportunity with our support from Google to study how Google Apps is playing out on a series of university campuses. So we've done a study on 6 campuses, 5 UC campuses plus the University of Michigan, where we have strong connections. And we've actually done a variety of things. The main thing has been an annual survey of undergraduates on these campuses about their practices in using Google Apps. We've done other things like survey administrators. We've looked into the clubs because they turn out to be a kind of a vector for adoption of these technologies. We've talked to faculty and the graduate students as well. But I'm going to focus here mainly on the stuff we've done with undergraduates. Okay, let me talk briefly about the cloud. So there's more than one cloud, obviously, and we're not alone out there in the cloud. One of the things we looked at, we did a study, primarily Amy Voida did this study, an interview study of faculty and graduate students about their use of Google Apps in research collaborations, in teaching, and so on. And one of the kind of themes that emerged from this was how much trouble people were having with the cloud, and a whole variety of issues. And as I say, I'll only point to, we had a paper at CHI this last year. It has a lot of detail in it about what we found. But for example, we found that the average number of email accounts in the people we interviewed was 5. It ranged all the way from 1 to 12. So people are sort of managing a whole bunch of different identities, not just for mail accounts, but for other things, cloud services of various kinds and so on. And there's confusion. It's also the case that things don't act the same in the cloud. So if you're working on, say, Google Drive with a bunch of documents and materials, or you're working, say, on Dropbox, things behave differently. Things come and go. Permissions are more complicated. They're not the same in the different environments and so on. So just sort of a lot of different confusions about what is going on, which is why we've talked about this as sort of thunder in the clouds. As I say, The kind of story is that people are still quite confused about this. I think there's an interesting follow-up study to do to see if people are sort of sorting out what's happening with the cloud. But it's a source of confusion to a lot of people, and you can see a lot of the empirical details in the Kai paper. Okay, with that, any questions about, I mean, that was very brief about the cloud, but any questions? I guess it's probably not surprising that it is a little confusing for people.
Can you go back one slide? Maybe. This part is the thing that confuses me.
Yeah.
So when I work with different people, they say, oh, I just put it in Dropbox. That was the first time I'd heard about Dropbox, was when somebody said, well, that's where I put it, as opposed to talking about it beforehand about how we're going to manage all of our documents. This is several years ago. But now I'm looking for a document like the last presentation here, and I'm looking all over my file structure, cannot find it. What did I call it? It should be in the Google folder, et cetera, et cetera. And it turned out, no, it was in Google Drive, right? So it was 20 minutes lost on that. So searching over everything, I'm not sure. In academics anyway, we collaborate with a lot of people and they have lots of different habits. And so I have to think about, well, how are we doing this one? I want to touch briefly on some work that Julia Haynes is doing about seed accelerators. There is a delay. Here we go. All right, seed accelerators, born in Silicon Valley, where you bring together a lot of entrepreneurs, give them time to learn from each other, present to each other. It's a big contest, and at the end, there are some winners, and they get venture capital. So the question is, how does this translate to places around the world? More and more people are interested in this because they want to develop applications for their own people, right, in their own situations, so around the world. So Julia's interviewed a number of people in every major geographic region that has these seed accelerators. She visited accelerators in North America, Africa, Australia, and Asia. And then she just came back from a 3-month in-depth field at one accelerator in Singapore following 9 startups. And she's about to go off to Buenos Aires, Argentina. These are just photographs from her particular experiences. We have only a few nuggets of what she found, and I think this is really interesting, that Silicon Valley culture does not travel well. All right, so US values of shared risk, equity, accepting failure, openness to differences, which is sort of the lifeblood of how these accelerators work around here, do not translate well when you go to places, she noticed in Asia, where there are values of hierarchy, status, and collectivism. And so a lot of mismatch in how the behavior of the people is and what they're, how they're coming out with the ideas. Here's a good example in Korea. Being an entrepreneur is being considered a failure. Around here, it's, you know, kudos for being an entrepreneur. But since 80% of their gross domestic product comes from 10 conglomerates, if you don't work for one of them, you're a failure, right? And so the people who are working in these seed accelerators have a very different cultural view about what they're doing. So this is all work in progress. She'll probably finish in a year. And we can report back on what she's finding. There's a lot of stuff happening about what's happening inside Google Docs. And how do we look at it? What are the activities? How do people really collaborate sort of at the much more micro level? And we've been doing a lot of visualizations of the collaboration inside Google Docs. And we are using a variation of history flow, which Fernando Villegas and Martin Wattenberg developed a number of years ago to look at Wikipedia, right, Wikipedia. So we translate that into Google Docs. So time goes this way, color is a person, and this is just the volume of what they are developing. So somebody put in the title of the document, somebody put in a chunk, there's some editing, a whole bunch more, and self-editing, that black here, it's actually a darker orange and various kinds of self-editing, editing somebody else's stuff, all right, whole bunch more added at the beginning, this chunk maintained, right, and then just a lot more editing. So this is one document. This is another one with a lot more activity, all right, and the same number of people doing stuff, but you can see how things, in both cases, things are growing. I'm going to show you some cases where they don't just grow. People will cut whole pieces out of things. But this is an instant visualization about what went on. If you were an author of one of these things, what would you want to look at? Who cut my stuff? who's editing, where has nobody edited, right? Maybe I should go in and read some of that stuff. Or for researchers, just to find out, well, what's interesting in here? Where's the good stuff? What's the characteristics of things that change a lot, the characteristics of things that don't? So I have 97 documents. What's nice about this is it's a grid. It's the same 4 or 5 assignments done by lots of different teams. And so I can say, is this assignment generating a signature way of working, or do teams develop a signature way of working? All right, so is it the document or is it the team? It'll be a mix, but it'll be interesting. We also have some real-world documents that people have developed in Google Docs, several big grant proposals, and Gary's and my book we wrote in Google Docs until the very end when it had to be translated into other formats. And that gets interesting because we know the whole backstory about who wrote what and why. All right.
And who deleted what and why.
And who deleted what and why. And there's in our background now the famous chapter 9, which was written, and then I wrote the second half, and he deleted the whole second half. So we had some discussion about that. And then he started on the second half, and then I convinced him to revert. All right, and then explained about, it was a whole story but we really know the backstory of that one, the famous chapter 9. All right, so what are we looking for? So in these visualizations, I was interested in things like that got cut. Can you see where it just goes up instead of down? So that's not an addition, that's a deletion. So I look inside the document, and it turns out the students are having a conversation in the document. It says down here, hey guys, just bullet points in each section, turn that into paragraphs later. This is when it's due, and that gets deleted later. I hope you guys work on this tonight and tomorrow. I'd rather have this done tonight, especially since I can't work after class, but you guys might. All right, so that's text. It's not a comment, it's text in there. And then later, of course, they delete it because it has to be all cleaned up and stuff for me. The other thing that was interesting in this particular document is how much heavy editing there is here. All right, this part stays pretty stable. This part has everybody in it. So I want to then go and look and what's in there. What were they discussing? And is this the business case? Right, so pitching their idea for a particular project. I think that this is going to lead to high quality, right, when everybody's in it, as opposed to you do part 1, I'll do part 2. All right, here was a surprise. And of course I went right back to the algorithm saying, what's going on here? Is this a bug? The answer is no. That they started working on this document, an orange guy came in here and deleted the whole thing. Said, this is a mess. And what he pasted in was a template for a scope statement. And then he said, well, that's not all of this is relevant for us. In fact, this whole second half we don't need. All right, and then they started fleshing out what was in that. But he said, the structure of this is a mess. And so I'm going to just start over. All right, so again, we've got some things, big things cut, and a great big thing at the end that was cut. And this started giving us ideas about, well, what is the API giving us? So if you look in this particular document, this again is a conversation at the beginning where everybody's saying, how do you use Google Docs? Right? They're teaching each other, and then of course that's not going to be in the final document. These turn out to be comments, unattributed to the location in which they arose. So that's what the API gives us, is there's a lot of text. And of course somebody came and cleaned it up before they turned it in to me. So we have to work with the people who are, if we want to pursue this, we want to work with people about what can the API give us, both about the comment structure and then, as you'll see in a minute, about simultaneous work. But this is Facebook about 3 days ago. This is Ben Peterson. A number of you know Ben, saying, I just finished creating my most complicated spreadsheet ever with Google Spreadsheets to support a collaborative review by 6 people of 30 proposals. So instead of using one application that's out there, like Manuscript Central and stuff like that, he did it in Google Spreadsheets. It replicates the basic conference review system, but without any code. It was complicated enough, et cetera, et cetera. And so he's showing a piece of it to give us ideas about what you can do that's collaborative, but structured by somebody at the beginning. My favorite comment is from his wife. down here. Alison Druin said something about geekiness, that he's going to, broadcast all of this on Facebook. All right, so we've been looking at spreadsheets. Did an interview study, a short study about who's using spreadsheets collaboratively and for what. There's a TV show production crew, there's an evaluator in clinical reporting at mental health facility, manager of billing, senior contract and grant analyst, all of which are using spreadsheets collaboratively. So early findings on this, knowing who created what in a spreadsheet is very important. And you want to know to audit or check things as they change. It could be a value, it could be a formula. Right, they brainstorm about the structure and then roles about who will fill in what. It's very structured about the roles and responsibilities. People ask permission to change things they didn't originate. And changing formulas or structure is critically more important than changing values, because it's all hidden and not revealed very well. There are visualizations of formula structures, like which cells are involved, that already come with a number of spreadsheet applications. But we'd like to look at authorship and values and things like that. This is a very complicated problem because it's very multidimensional. We have other things we've been playing with. One is just how much activity is there in a particular cell, and then some basic statistics about who did what when, about adding structure, adding values, editing. All right. So who's the major editor, and how did this progress over time? So this is as far as we are on spreadsheets. Ideas welcome about how to develop this further. The problem is that it's a two-dimensional thingy, and I think we're going to have to use animation in it, or decide from the end users which are the things that are most important for them to find out, and then do some analysis of that. That's it on where we are on visualization of collaboration. As I say, lots of ideas welcome on that. They are tough problems. The second is, we have to be careful about saying more is better, because it might be the small things that make something good, or the final structure being in a single voice and not being abrupt. The next set of studies we are embarking on is about quality. Does the document have better content? Does it cohere? What can we detect to alert authors to low quality? And what social practices make a good document? So that's the next chunk of work that we're doing. So several of us think that the heavy editing of each other's work suggests that there may be contentions, or it may be somebody's cleaning things up, right, to make it one voice or to make it cohere. So that would be sessions that we would look at about where are these and what actually is going on. We're going to have to do some quality assessments of what's going on. Does this actually make it better? But we would like to do as much as we can automatically. And so we're working on something we call Novox, which is new voice. Can we analyze the text for style changes in particular? So the backstory here is that I'm a co-editor of a book called Ways of Knowing an HCI, and some people in the room are chapter authors. Yes. There are 19 chapters in the book and 39 authors. So there are a lot of co-authored chapters, and in some of the early drafts, I, as an editor, could immediately tell that the voice changed, right? And then there would be a comment back to the people, make this one voice. Well, I think we can do better than that. What is it that I'm picking up? What kind of linguistic analysis can we do to figure out that the voice has changed and something has to be made more coherent in style? We don't need to do the kinds of linguistic analysis to find out whether Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. All right, all I need to know is something changed. Right? So that's easier to do, thank goodness. So we would like eventually to, if we find those abrupt changes, to be able to alert the author, not with a paperclip, but with some kind of indicator that maybe you ought to think about this to make this into one voice. And eventually maybe even to suggest in what way the voice has changed. I notice a lot of things about the use of however and but and semicolons, bullets versus paragraphs, the things that are big changes in there. So we have a program now that will look at known indicators of style change. David Guthrie is here at Google. He has done some of this seminal work about what are the things that are indicators of style change. Function words, not the content, but the function words. Average sentence length, syllables per word. So, you know, he writes at a level that's for graduate students, and I write for elementary school kids. You know, you're going to be able to pick that up, right, in sentence length and the kinds of words. We have a corpus that we are building. Some, we actually know the answer who wrote what, because we have revision histories in Google. So we can be blind to that and then check our algorithms to see whether we got the change in voice. So we're working on this right now. We have an analysis of paragraph by paragraph for about 45 different indicators, and are at the point of trying to say which are the big ones, what changes over time, but we're just in the midst of that one, sorry. Okay, we have one more. That is a glimmer in a student's eye, and I'm totally supporting this one. I think this is just fun. May work, may not. So helping people communicate across cultures. So we already know from a lot of our research on cross-culture that people from different countries, different habits from their local culture, not just countries, have different ways of communicating. We've done a lot of research about what do we know already out there on this. We know there's differences in eye contact, whether you're supposed to look at somebody or not, whether that means attention or deference. There's big differences in pause structure. For example, in America, we will wait max 2 seconds. All right, so if you end speaking, and if nobody says anything in 2 seconds, you have the floor again. Or then we're all stepping over everybody's sentences. You know, we don't even finish our sentence, somebody else is talking. That's the American way. And it turns out in other countries, you're supposed to stop and value what you just heard. Think about it before you then give a comment next. So it's like a 9-second pause. Imagine those two people talking to each other. One doesn't say anything. Right? Because it hasn't waited long enough for me to say this is the time for me to jump in here. So one person's talking all the time, one person's not talking at all, and the person who is talking all the time thinks the other guy has nothing to say, and the guy who has, quote, nothing to say thinks this guy is rude, all right? And things go badly. All right, so that's one, pause structure. Also expressing the negative. There's a paper study of long-distance collaboration at Google that we've been looking at, where expressing the negative is a really hard problem. For example, in India, you don't say you can't do something, and yet the people from the US needed to know whether this is beyond what their time and resources were. It turns out the solution is to say, what more resources do you need in order to get this done, as opposed to, can you get this done? All right, you get a very different response from that. But so you need to know these things in order to have these conversations go well. So the thing is to find a middle ground. Later I'll look at that cartoon, it's really cute. Okay, in sum, that's what we're doing. We've got a lot of stuff going on the macro, a lot of attention on the micro about what's going on inside Google Docs for collaboration, looking for indices of quality, trying to extend to spreadsheets and other kinds of documents. And we need some help. So if you can guide us to people who can help us with the API, that's critical. The other is more ideas about how to visualize some of this and what's important to you when you use various kinds of Google applications. Okay, thank you.